went to seminary with some strange people, actually. But this one was probably, she ended up being my absolute best friend in seminary for 3 years. She kind of took me by the hand and said, you need to know some things, you know. So I'm way too old to, you know, I'm on a college setting, you know, there's some things you need to know about college. So I got to, I spend a lot of time with her. She's now the associate pastor at one of the larger churches in Naperville. She's a third generation United Methodist pastor. So she emailed, she stays in contact with me with Facebook and some other things, but she thought that this would be interesting, so she sent me a note. And I want to get it right, so that's why I brought my iPad today, because I want you to bring this in. John's Gospel is all about, John's story of the resurrection is all about what you see. It's not about a story about people telling people other things. Mary comes alone. The disciples come, and one by one they look in. And some enter, and Mary enters. And the only thing that matters is what they see. So Sarah, her name's Sarah, she sends me this email about this encounter she had. She calls him Costco guy. And so when he says Costco guy to me, so she's in line. She says, Costco guy. Looks like the party's at your place. Me. Actually, no, it's at my church. Costco guy. Oh, wow. That's so nice. Have a merry, blessed, happy Easter. Me. Wow. Thank you. You too. Costco guy. Oh, I don't do Easter. Resurrection's just crazy. Me. Well, it's really about new beginnings, second chances, fresh starts, and things like that. Costco guy. I thought it was about Jesus flying to heaven or something like that. Me. I must have missed that Sunday school today we learned about flying Jesus. Costco guy. I'm pretty sure they made a movie about it. You could just check that out. She ends it by saying, what's happening? What's this day about? Flying Jesus? Resurrection? What's happened? It is all about what you see. Costco guy sees flying Jesus. Sarah sees what the video showed us. Restoration, regeneration. Who's allowed to be with us? We are at the point in time in our culture where we celebrate the anniversaries of death and destruction about every day. It's the anniversary of something. What's today?
Easter.
The Boston Marathon. We'll have, in a while, we'll have the tragedy on the ferry a year from now. And the anniversary of the date that the airplane went down that we don't even know where it's at. And this is the anniversary of the outbreak of Ebola again that's going to take the lives of so many people. And on and on and on. In fact, that we have now that it just seems to be vogue that we pick up and we get tired of even hearing about it. We open up the paper or look at the news and somebody else decided that the best thing they could do that day was shoot up a school or a mall. And death is everywhere, and people are just getting so that they are inoculated to it, so that it's like, again, pass the potatoes. Again. You see? And the question is, as we look at this resurrection, is that going to define us? Is death and destruction going to be what makes us us? Is that what we have to decide how we're going to proceed through our life? And that's what this story from John is all about. I love the gospel I love it when we take this story from John. I like Matthew and Mark and Luke and all their take of the resurrection story too. There's a lot of characters involved. They got the women with the purpose to come in there to do the preparation of the body, and we've got the earthquake to explain why the stone's not there in Matthew's gospel, and then we've got all this other stuff going on in John's gospel. Mary shows up, the stone's rolled away, boom. What do you see? Mary. Why is Mary there? And who's Mary? Mary is somebody that Jesus made no longer the other. Give her a purpose. Jesus said early in his ministry, in Luke chapter 8, we're told that Jesus encounters as he's going around the Sea of Galilee and that he is preaching and teaching, and he runs across an opportunity it says that he is with the 12 disciples and 3 women, Joanna and Mary, women who he had cast demons out of. Mary Magdalene, 7. Jesus had restored her to purpose. Mary Magdalene is the only woman the only person specifically named that was with Jesus during his ministry, during the arrest, during the crucifixion, and during the resurrection. The only person named by name. Which, in my way of thinking, makes her pretty important. But you look at her pictures and you see that these different depictions of Mary over the years, that she's been blended, and she's got this jar of ointment. And there's nothing in the Gospels that ever said that Mary of Magdala ever carried it, was the same Mary that anointed Jesus' feet and was wiping her with her hair. But what we do know about her is it says in Luke chapter 8, that her and the other 2 women supported the ministry of the 12, using their resources. So what we know is she's probably a woman of means. She had assets. And she seen value in Christ because Christ seen value in her. So this is the Mary that comes to the tomb on Easter morning. And we ask ourselves at this very moment that she comes to the tomb, why? What did she expect as she came to the tomb? In our Lenten walk, we've met a bunch of people that Jesus has encountered. We started on, we used our baptismal covenant, and as we went through, we first encounter was with the devil, because we talked about Jesus' temptation and his being like us, tempted in every way. And I almost skipped that one because I was trying to get a point that Jesus had tried to, in every person he encountered, lift them out of where they were into a resurrected life. So I almost didn't mention Satan. Then I went back and read the account in Matthew again, and when Satan tries to talk to him, Jesus says, man doesn't live by bread alone. There are greater things in this world. Don't tempt the God, but hang on every word that God says. You should worship God alone. And then I'm thinking, he was trying to lift Satan up at the same time. We met Nicodemus, who comes at night, who Jesus tells to be born again. We met the woman at the well. Jesus offers her living water. Tells her not only to drink it and take it and live it, but to share it, give it to others. And then we met the Pharisees and the crowds and everybody else that was with Jesus as he moved into Jerusalem in the last days. And now we meet Mary. Perhaps intimately for the first time. She's a tangential thing in the past. And over the history, she's gotten kind of a bad rap. Like I said, she carries the oil. She's been portrayed. She's either been lifted to sainthood, and some say she's a prostitute. And the Bible makes no account of that. There's no account of that. Jesus had lifted her up and knew that he had restored her. He knew that he had recreated her life. And he had made something special out of her. She was one of the people that lived on this side of the resurrection. However, she goes to the tomb. And as we ask ourselves why, we wonder what she believes as she goes. Because we're going to have to, as each one of us this day takes a look at that empty tomb, we have to ask ourselves, what do we see? So Mary, she's the first one to get there. And it doesn't say that she goes in. She just sees the stones rolled away. She goes and gets the disciples, Peter and the one that Jesus loved. They run back. The one that Jesus loved gets there first. He goes in. And it says that when he went in and looked, he believed. Peter goes in, sees the linens laying there. And no doubt he remembers the linens of Lazarus. And the need for Jesus to tell somebody to unbind him and let him go. Who did that? And the other cloth that was put away. And Peter doesn't say anything about him. It just says he left. And there's Mary who hangs there. And she looks in and she sees the angels. And once again, she says to the angels, "Where have you taken him?" Why? And they ask her, why are you weeping? And we know the rest of the story. Did Mary go to the tomb to confirm the fact that Jesus was dead, or did she go to the tomb to confirm the fact that Jesus had been lifted and restored, and that did she go there to see the glory of the Lord, or did she go there just to grieve over a dead body? The fact that she sees Jesus and doesn't recognize him, and Jesus says, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And then and even in that voice, Jesus tells her, "Mary." And speaking of the voice, our mind immediately goes back to John telling us in chapter 10 that Jesus said, "I'm the good shepherd. The sheep, I know my sheep, and the sheep know me. I call my sheep by voice. I call them by their name, and they respond." And Jesus says, "Mary." We're not any different than Mary was. As we go and look inside this empty tomb, and we come here this morning, we ask ourselves, like the video says, which side of the resurrection do you stand on? Do you allow yourself to live on this side? Does the resurrection of Christ mean to you that you no longer have that to fear? Does the resurrection of Christ mean that we can live as people that know the promise of our eternity? Or are we still bothered by the fact that we may end up in a tomb, wrapped in linen? Something that the gardener might want to carry away. We ask ourselves this morning the purpose of the resurrection, the purpose of the stone that's rolled away, so that we can look in and decide how we're going to live. Are we going to live as Easter people who live on this side of the resurrection? Or will we be people that live in grief? Easter is our premier event. It is the purpose of the church. Paul says that if Christ had not been risen, then if Christ is not resurrected, then we are people to be most pitied, because then nobody will be resurrected. But since Christ is resurrected, we have the hope of eternity. We have the hope that was given to us of eternal life. One of these days we'll get into a sermon of what that looks like and why they didn't recognize Jesus and all that kind of stuff, and I can't wait to get there. But for today, it's more about, what do you see? What will you allow yourself to see? And hopefully it's not based on fear, but based more on joy. That the resurrection will give us the hope of eternity that will sustain us in the rest of this earthly trek, so that nothing that we encounter can take us down that hole and bury us in the ground so far that we cannot see the light of resurrection. When you go to the tomb, what do you see? When you look in, a body that's missing, or a resurrected Jesus that gives us the power of living. I hope you're where you need to be, because it's a good place. Thanks be to God.